Hello watch enthusiasts. Now, over the past couple of years I've spoken quite extensively about watches under the £3,000 and £4,000 price tags, simply because this area of the watch industry is by far the most successful in terms of sales on a general basis. However, what I will say is that I've received a great many emails asking for me to produce videos on higher price ranges around the £10,000 mark. And as I don't address this subject very often, simply due to the fact that the vast majority of purchases happen below this point, I'd like to produce a video on a few alternative options for a luxury watch under the £10,000 mark. Because most of us know of the Rolex Submariner, and indeed a lot of the Omegas on the market, along with Breitling for instance. But in many ways there are a lot of other watches from similarly large brands that go unnoticed, which in my eyes offer a great deal of value and a slightly different option for someone who wants a high quality, good value timepiece at these higher price ranges. And of course, before I begin the video, I would like to encourage you all to join the Watch Guys, which is my group on Snups, which is a social media platform where you can share pictures of your collections and your interests. And on this group, which is of course called the Watch Guys, you can ask any questions, post any pictures, and indeed ask me any questions along with any other viewers or enthusiasts, which I'll strive to reply to personally. And for today's featured picture from the group, we have this fantastic picture of Giant Racer's tremendous aqua timer from IWC. And I must say that this particular reference is without a doubt one of the best looking dive watches ever made. I'm happy to take argument on that, but I must say, compared to other options that were on the market previously, the 3536 aqua timer is a really gorgeous dive watch and a remarkable piece in its own right. Now the first watch I'd like to talk about is a piece which comes in at £4,900. And this piece is the Panerai PAM0610, or the Black Seal 8 Days. And this is a piece which finds its original origins in 1936, but in truth the first watch to be produced that looked comparable to this watch was released in 1938. And this was produced for the Italian Navy by Panerai, and had this remarkable style of dial which was more clean than anything seen before, with these simple 4 numerals which were composed of a radium base, which was put underneath a black dial and formed what we call a sandwich dial. Additionally, it simply had 2 hands, an hour and a minute hand, on an extremely legible dial, as you can see. And the case of the watch was this large cushion-shaped case, and in this case is 45mm in diameter. And in many ways Panerai fell into disrepute for using ETA movements in watches which frankly should have had in-house movements for the price they were asking. However, this watch has the in-house caliber 5000, and in many ways, in my eyes at least, symbolises Panerai's rebirth in the form of a brand which truly produces some remarkable pieces which are utterly unique on the market and offer the buyer something really different to anything else. And by comparison to other Panerai models, this piece is by far the most delicate, with a very slim polished bezel and a fully polished cushion style of case with very soft edges, which only becomes truly pointed and sharp at its corners, but not in any way to cause discomfort whilst wearing it. Additionally, it has these beautiful wire lugs which extend from the case and were replaced by Panerai in 1940 on a request from the Navy. But these do give such a classical look to the watch that I must say I do like the watch with them. And these complement that beautiful onion crown which extends from the right-hand side of the case with a fantastic level of elegance due to its very simple and minimalistic form. And at 45mm, this watch is without doubt a large timepiece. However, it's worth noting the fact that I have about 6.5 to 6.75 inch wrists, which are seen as rather small, and I've found that the 47mm models of this timepiece still wear very comfortably due to that cushion shape, and in many ways if this watch was any smaller it simply wouldn't look right on the wrist. But I must say, in terms of its form, this is an extremely well-designed watch which is very comfortable due to a very heavily padded leather strap of extremely high quality, which works as a whole unit extraordinarily well. And whilst the watch is water resistant to 100 metres, it does still retain this beautiful sapphire caseback, which allows a view into that tremendous-looking in-house caliber P5000. And the finishing of this movement is very different to other brands because it does at first appear fairly simple in its bridge finishing, with a simple brushed effect on many areas. However, if one gazes into the movement through those cutouts in its bridges, one does see a lot of perlage and a lot of decoration built into this movement, which shows it certainly isn't a doddle, or so to speak, to create. There is also the element of the fact that this movement is a genuine improvement on the previous movements used by Panerai, which were often Rolex calibers or indeed in later years ETA movements, with Angelus movements being used briefly by the brand. And this does take on from the purpose of having very long power reserves, the idea being that the crowns of these watches wouldn't have to be manipulated as much, and so the seals would last longer. And therefore this watch has an 8-day power reserve, which means that you can wind it up once every 8 days, while still enjoying the practicality of that long power reserve and a great view of the movement, with that fantastic balance bridge over that balance wheel in the corner, which makes this watch a wonderful looking and really tremendous option for someone who wants a great hybrid between a dress watch and a sports watch with classic style and a true military heritage. And at the £5,000 price mark, we have a piece which competes extremely well with the stainless steel Rolex Datejust. And this is the Grand-Seiko SBGE 205, or the spring drive GMT. And whilst often the spring drive GMT movement, which is, or rather watch, which is discussed a lot, is the larger version with the sapphire bezel. However, at 44mm, that's not a terribly versatile watch and is significantly more expensive. Whereas this piece, I feel, is very much an underrated piece, and is a very different alternative to something like a Rolex Datejust, offering potentially significantly better value. And this is a stainless steel 41mm timepiece, which is 13.8mm thick, which is heftier than one would normally want from a dress watch, but bearing in mind the thick bracelet and the 100-metre water resistance this watch wields, it is in fact a very versatile timepiece which could easily be worn every day without any concern for its well-being in terms of its resistance to the elements. And the watch itself is very magnificently crafted, really, from stainless steel with polished and brushed surfaces in a typical Seiko manner. And the case of this watch really is magnificently finished, and it's finished, as I've said, in both brushed and polished finishes with traditional polishing techniques used to polish it. And again, it's on a very typical bracelet of Seiko, with those two finishes again, but with a 5-link design, which breaks up the design and makes this look different to really anything else on the market. The detailing on this watch is also phenomenal, with these faceted indices on the dial and these fantastic Dauphine-style hands, which are sharper than anything else you would see on the market. There's also the wonderfully capped second hand, which has that top section on its centre, which works enormously well and is something which Grand-Seiko always offer on their timepieces, but I feel should be offered by more brands because it cleans up that central axis of the dial. We do also see in this very subtle hue of pale beige this style of graduations around the edge of the dial from 0 to 24, which runs for that GMT hand, which is in blue and is fairly discreet and picks up on small details of colour around the rest of the dial. And this provides you with a second time zone without any sort of large bezel, and does provide you with something very convenient to use. Additionally, you have a power reserve indicator, again on the dial as well, which is discreet and isn't obtrusive in any way, which I do appreciate a great deal, and I think matches very well with the polished and brushed applied sections on the dial as well. However, where this watch represents the best value is in its movement, which is a Seiko caliber 9R66. And this is a caliber which is a spring drive movement from Grand-Seiko themselves. And that means that this offers a very different power delivery and in many ways is a genre of its own in terms of movements, because it's not technically mechanical in its entirety and it's not completely quartz. And what you're really furnished with is a mechanical movement without an escapement in the traditional form, and rather than escapement you have a glide wheel. And this operates really by transferring energy from the spring to the hands via a number of wheels and cogs. However, in the process, this provides energy for a current to apply a brake to what they call a glide wheel. And this allows the second hand to have a completely smooth flow without the traditional stuttering of a mechanical movement, which is a phenomenal idea, and Seiko is a unique brand in terms of producing this in the form of this GMT watch. And this allows immense accuracy, with accuracy of 15 seconds off per month, which for a mechanical movement is simply unheard of. The movement is of course visible through the caseback, which is a sapphire exhibition caseback, which is finished in a typically Seiko sort of form, with more technical and engineering-based styles of decoration than the traditional, very elaborate style of Swiss decoration, which I think fits extremely well with the technical aspect of this anti-magnetic and shock-resistant timepiece, which offers practicality of the 72-hour power reserve and this GMT function with that power reserve indicator, as well as a date and an accuracy which simply is unprecedented. And for this £5,000 price mark, I think frankly it does offer better value than something like a Rolex Datejust, or even some of Omega's offerings for this price range in the form of the Constellation, which makes this watch a very interesting option if you want something very different and something which will complement other automatic or mechanical watches in the collection. Now, the following watch is an interesting piece for those who are interested in a luxury dive watch. And there's a great deal on the market in terms of luxury dive watches, from the Rolex Submariner to the Omega Seamaster 300. However, I feel one watch which bridges the gap between the high luxury and the standard sort of luxury segment of Omega and Rolex is Blancpain. And their dive watch, the 50 Fathoms, and specifically in this video, the Bathyscaphe, in 38mm now, offers a remarkable package, and a package which is very different to anything else on the market, and perhaps offers a setup which will appeal to a great many people due to the sizing of this watch. And this piece really is unique on the market at this size, which at 38mm is remarkably modest in its sizing, and has a fully brushed stainless steel case, which is both modern and old-fashioned at the same time. And of course, bearing in mind the 50 Fathoms was the first proper dive watch with a dive bezel, it has a great deal of heritage behind it. And the design of this watch is truly clean and elegant, with narrow lugs which taper outwards in a very organic form, with bevels down their edges, which again help to emphasise their curve down towards the wrist. The crown is unprotected, but due to its large size really shouldn't suffer any problems as a result of this, and gives a fantastic old-fashioned appearance to this watch, which is unique on the market in this range. And then one has the dial, which is this tremendous blue or grey or anthracite style of sunburst effect dial, which is helped by the fact that it's slightly domed to apply a certain sheen to it, which mimics the sea's iridescence. Meanwhile, you have hands which are very nicely formed and crafted from white gold, which helps a great deal in terms of avoiding corrosion and damage to the hands over time, as a result of reactions with any moisture inside the case, which would otherwise be the case, and means that this watch, with a minimal amount of addition in terms of price for these white gold hands, is able to last much longer in its original form, which means that in days to come, when this watch is for sale on the vintage market, it will have a lustre which won't go away in the same way as a lot of vintage watches that we see now with steel hands do. The date is carefully tucked at 4:30 as well, which is also coloured the same colour as the dial with white text, which does help to make this appear as less of an obtrusive sort of addition to the dial, and more of a practical addition. Then, of course, the case itself is a 300-metre water-resistant case, which remains only 10.77mm thick, which is an impressive feat, bearing in mind that it has an exhibition case back. And housed within this watch is the Blancpain caliber 1150, and this is an ultra-slim 3.25mm thick movement, which is a very impressive movement in its own right, and many would regard as dress watch quality in terms of its build. And the movement itself provides a 100-hour power reserve, which is well in excess of other options on the market at this price range, and also provides a level of detail and decoration which isn't seen either, which in many ways does outdo the slightly less expensive options from Omega on the Seamaster 300, which is by no means an undecorated watch and is a beautiful piece in its own right. But this does offer a genuine alternative in terms of detailing and finishing. And the bezel is also very nicely produced on this watch, with fantastic cuts into the sides of that coin edge bezel, which allows fantastic grip, as well as a beautifully coloured style of insert, which is of course either black or blue. But in the blue colour, certainly there is a wonderful sheen to this, and it's finished in this very high polish, which with its full graduations gives it a certain symmetry, which is very well chosen. And I think this is often something which a lot of people do like, the fact that it's fully graduated all the way around, because it gives it an elegance and an understated sort of form, which retains a certain function due to the fact that it is easier to read, but does maintain a simplicity and a symmetry across the dial and front of the watch, which otherwise wouldn't be seen. And the watch is offered on a rather attractive style of woven and rubber-backed strap, which provides a look which is reminiscent of straps used in the 1950s on these watches, to provide a water-resistant but also comfortable and traditionally soft style of strap, which I think works very, very well with the design of this watch, to provide you with a classic-looking but extremely modern timepiece. And the penultimate watch in this video includes details which are frankly worthy of a high horology luxury timepiece. However, this watch comes in at around the same price as a two-tone Rolex Datejust, which I think is remarkable, bearing in mind the fact that this watch is a real look into the past in terms of watchmaking, and a beautiful piece as an entirety. And this is the JLC Reverso Classic Medium Duoface Small Second, which is a remarkably long name for a watch that's remarkably small. And this is a 42.9mm by 25.5mm watch, and the proportions of this watch actually are just right. because the width of the watch makes it slim on the wrist and appears to meld into its leather band extremely well. And in addition to that, the 42.9mm length of the watch is not a problem really, because it's designed to be a very flat dress watch, and I think it should fit within the confines of the wrist without having to curve down. And so I would advise buying this watch over the large one unless you really have tried it on and you're sure. And this piece is quite a curious watch at £7,300, because it's a watch that's really like nothing else on the market. And this is a two-face timepiece. And the origins of this watch begin in 1931, when it was commissioned and designed for British soldiers in India who played polo and were continually damaging watches by the blows of their mallets or indeed of the polo ball. And so as a result, the Reverso was conceived with a steel chassis with a rotating watch box, which could be turned over to reveal a simple metal caseback, which would protect the watch during play. And this, of course, also moved the crown to the other side of the watch out of the way. Whereas with this model, we see a use of this style to a degree which actually is remarkably impressive. And on the front of this watch, we have a beautiful silver guilloche style of dial, with a great deal of detail put into it, with brushing and that traditional Art Deco style which is so typical of the 1930s. And if one turns over the rather beautifully finished and lined polished stainless steel case to the reverse position, we find a black hobnail effect dial which echoes the design of the original 1931 model, though with modern alterations and changes. And this represents a travel time, so you can set each face of this watch independently of the other, which allows you to set 2 times. And this allows you to either use the watch if you live in 2 locations when travelling, you can simply flip the watch over, or alternatively, if you want to keep one clear time zone on the front of the watch, but want to be able to quickly judge what time it is in another part of the world with the case back, this is possible as well. And the difference between the two is that the silver dial features the small seconds on it, whilst the black dial on the back of the watch features in its place a 24-hour indicator and a day and night marker, so you can tell exactly which half of the day you're looking at, which is an interesting detail and one which I think adds a lot of functionality to an already curious little watch. And due to its modest size, its beautifully finished case, which is very heavily curved but still remains remarkably slim at 9.2mm in thickness, this watch very much becomes the very definition of elegance, because it is a watch which is designed to be understated and not necessarily noticeable when it slips under a cuff, but it provides all the complication of a style of truly complicated luxury timepiece for a price which is, of course, rather high, but bearing in mind the complications this watch offers, actually extremely reasonable. And internally the watch contains an in-house movement by JLC designed specifically for this type of watch, which is a caliber 854 A/2, which is of course that in-house double-faced caliber, which is housed within that central portion of the case on that hinge, and which provides this wonderful complication which otherwise is truly unique in the watch industry. And the way this watch has come along in time is also really very beautiful in the way they've flattened the crown to make it more of an elegant shape. They've beautifully and really very delicately blued the hands thermally, as well as providing those filled white hands in that sword style on the opposite side of the dial, giving you both a very delicate style of day dial or a night dial on the opposite side, which gives you really the best of both worlds with a timepiece which otherwise is very much a growing classic, and something which for £7,000 odd is a remarkable purchase and an interesting option and an alternative to other watches at this price range. And the final watch I'd like to talk about in this video is a piece which I feel really does give the Rolex Daytona a run for its money, and in fact also competes very well with the Omega Speedmaster Dark Side of the Moon, and other experimental and high-grade chronographs around this price range. And this is the Zenith El Primero Defy 21, and it's a piece which impressed me enormously at Basel World 2017, and is a beautifully crafted 44mm cased watch. And in this video I'd just like to talk about the titanium models. There is also a blackened aluminium version, but it falls outside the realms of this video in terms of pricing. And this is a piece which comes in a 44mm titanium case which is brushed and polished in a very attractive way along the length of the case to give an elongation to the watch which is completely visual, but does work to make the watch appear better on the wrist and significantly better sized. It also works very well with the rubberized alligator strap which it comes on, which is very, very well fitted to the lugs, though it does have conventional lugs underneath. And the case of the watch is typical of their Defy range, with this angular form, which works beautifully with the concept of this watch as a truly experimental and scientific chronograph. And the engineering behind this watch is really remarkable in a way which isn't often said about watches in this price range. And of course the detailing on both the dial and the case is tremendous, but movement-wise this features an in-house automatic chronograph movement, which is derived from their usual style of automatic chronograph, which of course is the key part of the El Primero, being one of the first 3 automatic chronograph movements ever made. And this is a piece which is remarkable in that it provides 2 separate escapements inside its form. So it has one escapement which runs at 36,000 vibrations per hour, making it a high beat movement, which beats 10 times a second. Whereas on the other side we have a 360,000 beat per hour section which runs the chronograph. And this will only run for 50 minutes at a time, though if you do wind it whilst it's running, you can keep it running for longer than that. But the beauty of this is that you're able to have a chronograph which can count down to hundredths of a second, due to the fact that it beats that many times a minute, which is frankly remarkable and is something which is very rarely seen in watches, and especially not at this price range, because Montblanc made an equivalent watch, which was released at SIHH last year, and that watch cost in excess of £100,000. So Zenith being able to offer this at the price they do is unheard of. And some genuine innovations had to go into this watch in order to make it possible to last over a long period of time, and they've had to re-engineer the balance spring to be able to have these new carbon matrix nanotube versions, which are able to resist this sort of abuse on a regular basis. And this watch comes in 2 versions in titanium, and it comes in one version which is $9,600, which comes in at around £8,500, including 20% VAT, which is a version with this slightly warm silver matte dial with an interesting black rim around it, and polished indices, which are all very much of the style that Zenith uses. With black subdials, this also is the most legible of the models and is my personal favourite, because I feel it displays this model as a true El Primero without any skeletonized sections, with that wonderful power reserve for the chronograph at 12 o'clock. By contrast, the other titanium version, which comes in at $10,600, or about £9,400, is a version which has the skeletonized dial with a blue counter on the right-hand side of the dial, and cutouts in various places to allow you a view of the escapements and the innovation that's gone into this watch. And this certainly is a piece for a lover of all things mechanical, because it gives you a phenomenal view of this automatic chronograph in all its glory. And all versions do feature an exhibition caseback, but this really does take it to another level of detail and view of such a remarkable looking piece, which I think does fit the bill as far as an alternative chronograph for this price, which is well within the £10,000 mark, but competes with watches such as the Rolex Daytona, which often has its price built up £2,000 or £3,000 higher than this, due to the fact that there are such long waiting lists. And I'll conclude this video here, but do leave your comments down below as to what you thought of my choices and if there's anything you would have changed or included, because I really am interested to hear what you think. And if you did enjoy the video, then please do like, share and subscribe to help the channel and to be able to enjoy more content here in future. So thank you very much for watching. This is Sam on the Watch Guy, over and out.